In today's episode, I'm going to use a Magnum reflector to create lens flare for a spectacular effect. Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Exploring Photography right here on Adorama TV. I'm Mark Wallace, and today we're going to take this drab studio and we're going to transform it using some of my favorite lighting techniques. We're going to start by using one of my favorite light modifiers, this Magnum reflector, to create an environment that's going to help us shape our post-production effects. Now, helping me do this is a fantastic model. She's joining me today. Her name is Fanny Beladona. You probably recognize her from a video we shot a couple years ago in Paris about shooting in tiny spaces. It was really, really fun. And so today, we're gonna create very soft, beautiful Degas type portraits. I'm ready to go. You ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, let's set up our light right now. Well, it might not look like much, but behind me, we have our basic lighting setup all finished. So Fanny's in a very specific place, and we have this Magnum reflector right here. And if you'll notice, it is going toward the camera. Now, the reason for that is this light is blasting light into the lens of my camera, and that is going to cause some lens flare. It's going to also cause this big wash of light. And normally you would not want, you use a lens hood to eliminate that, but we want that because it's going to give us a layer of effect that we can use in post-production. So let me just show you exactly what that looks like. So Fanny, just give me a little wave, so I'll do this. There we go, perfect. All right, you can see from this image just a ghost. So that's Fanny back there. So it's Fanny with a layer of effects in front of her. We're going to use those effects to our advantage in post-production. So what we need to do, though, is we need to make Fanny show up. And to do that, we need to add a second light. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, we've added the last element. It's this giant Profoto umbrella with a diffusion panel. Fanny is in place right here. Let me walk you through exactly how this final step is set up. Fanny is in place. She's on axis with our camera. We're getting the lens flare that I talked about earlier from our Magnum reflector on this side, but we need to fill in on the opposite side of Fanny, and that's where this giant deep white umbrella comes in. This is a Profoto deep white umbrella with diffusion on the front. And so what this is doing is this is providing really nice soft fill light on the opposite side of Fanny. So we have this beautiful, nice, soft light. So we could shoot with just this all by itself, but to get that really amazing feel, we need the lens flare coming into our camera. And so with all of that set up, we're gonna start shooting and we'll show you the results. All right, Fanny, well now we're done in the studio, but that doesn't mean we're done with the work. We need to put these images into post-production using Lightroom and Photoshop and the Nik software collection so that what I have in my mind matches what we actually shot. So let me put these into my computer. We'll start doing the post-production. I'll show you how to do that right now. Let's dive into Lightroom and go through the post-production process that I use. And I just want to mention that there's no definitive way to edit these images. You can do this however you'd like. In fact, I've got two images that I have edited, and if I compare those side by side, you can see that they are not the same. That's because I was playing with a couple of different things. You should do that too. So let me just show you what I did. We'll just start with this image here, and we'll go over into the Develop module. And I'm going to kick out my panels. I'm doing that with the Shift Tab key. That gets rid of the panels on the top and the bottom of the sides. I'll hit Tab to bring in the sides again, and then just kick out my left-hand panel. So I only have the one on the right to worry about. Now, the reason I like this image is because of this lens flare that lines up accidentally right next to her arm. It sort of complements the shape of her pose. It works pretty good. Now, I've already done all of my basic tonality adjustments, so I'm not going to walk you through all of those things based on the time we have, but there are a couple of things that I really want to show you. The first is to use a profile. Now, the profiles are the things that start, they're the foundation to all of your tonality adjustments, and Adobe just launched a bunch of new profiles. And if you zip through these, you can sort of see by hovering over them how they change the look and feel of your image. There are all kinds of different ones. You should play with those. The one I like is this one right here, this Modern 04. It gives me some purples, and it sort of keeps a nice haze on the image. You can adjust this slider here up so you can increase or decrease the amount of the profile that you're seeing. I'm just going to keep that at 100 and I'll close that. So that's the first thing I've done to these images. I've selected a profile that complements the look that I'm going for. The other thing that I really want to show you is this dehaze slider. Now, normally we'd use that for landscape photography, but what you can do if you go to the left, this sort of gives us more of a haze. If I go to the right, it gets rid of that and gives us more contrast. So I want sort of that ethereal feel. I want that atmospheric feel. So I'm going to take the dehaze and slide it to about -10. And so that will give me that haze that I sort of want. And so I'm doing something that's opposite of what you would normally do. Now that we've done that, we need to do one more thing. You'll notice that I've got a bunch of junk on the sides of this image. I've got stuff in the studio that I don't want to see in my image. And so I'm going to crop this in Lightroom before I take it over into Photoshop. So I'm going to make sure that I've unclicked this little lock here so that my aspect ratio is not constrained. I'm going to just bring this in on the right and on the left to get rid of the junk that I don't want to edit. So I'm going to do that before I take this over into Photoshop. Then I'm going to right click, edit in Adobe Photoshop CC 2019. Now that's going to bring us right into Photoshop. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to add some motion to this image. That's why we brought it into Photoshop, because I want to start moving pixels around and creating some effects. So I'm going to copy the background layer by hitting Command J, and I'm going to name this Dress Blur. And then what I'll do here is I'm going to go to Filter, and then I'm going to go to Blur, and then what I'll use is motion blur. Now you can try radial blur or motion blur. Either one of these will work, but I'm going to use motion blur for this. And what I'll do here is I've got this set to about 140 pixels, and you can see that I'm getting some really cool blur effects. Now the angle of the blur really matters, because if I have the angle at the wrong way, so going horizontally, up here on the dress and on her arms and stuff, you're going to see some problems when we start masking this. So the thing that you want to do is to try to keep this at around 86 to 90 degrees. So it is vertical if you have an image that looks sort of like this. So I will say OK, and that is going to blur everything. Now, of course, we don't want everything to be blurred. So what I'll do is I will add a layer mask. Then I'll use my background layer, which is black, and I'll hit Command Delete to fill the background layer with black. So that masks everything. Then I'll just grab a brush. So I'll hit B for brush, and I'm using my foreground color, which is white, and I'm going to start painting in that mask, and it's going to paint that blur on. And this is why you want to use a vertical blur, because if it's horizontal, when you start to blend the non-blur with the blur, you're really going to see a big difference. So I'll paint this on really, really quickly. And you can see that we're really creating something new with the bottom of this dress. It's giving it some motion. It's giving it some flavor that is not something that we see in the camera itself. Okay, so now we've done that. The next thing I want to do is I want to create some texture and some additional effects. So what I'll do here is I'm going to create a copy of this layer and the background layer. So I'll do that by hitting Shift Option Command E, and that will create a new layer that has everything below it all in one layer. So I'll call this the master layer, and then I'm going to go into my filters, go to Nik Collection, to Analog Effects Pro 2. Now once I'm in Analog Effects Pro 2, I'll just maximize this window so we can see things. I've already created this custom preset here called Fanny Beauty Grain. And what it is doing is it's adding a layer of adjustments and a specific film type. So you can see that's really adding some grain. If I'll zoom this in here, you can see that everything is really, really grainy, and that will give us some really cool texture. So I'll zoom back out here. So it's just a film type. So it's a subtle film type. The first one on the second row here, I have that at a 100% strength. 360 grains per pixel on the harder side of the soft hard slider. I wish that had a definite number, but it doesn't, so you sort of fudge that. And then on my basic adjustments, I set my detail extraction to 25%, increased the contrast to 15%, and left everything else alone. So that's all there is to this filter. It's just some grain and a slight adjustment to the tonality of the image. So I'll hit OK to bring this back into Photoshop. All right, well, there's one more thing that we need to do, and that is to fix the aspect ratio. We cropped this in Lightroom, and it's a weird aspect ratio. And so I want this to be a 16:9 image so that I can use it in the video that you're watching. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my crop tool here, and I'm going to select a 16:9 aspect ratio. And the other thing I want to do is make sure that content aware has been checked. So this has to be checked. And the reason for that is because I want Photoshop to create areas in the image that don't exist. So watch what happens when I take this and I'm going to start stretching this out so that I get all of Fanny in the image. I'll make sure she's over on the left-hand third of the image here. And I'm going to crop this about right here, a little bit more headroom. That looks pretty good. So you can see on the left and the right, I need some extra stuff here that doesn't exist. But because I have content aware selected, Photoshop is going to attempt to create content where none exists. So I will hit OK. And now Photoshop has created areas in the image that didn't exist before. Now it had some issues on the corners, and so you'll need to go in and make some changes using the clone tool, the patch tool, etc. And so I'll do that really fast and then show you the final results. Well, after a bit of post-production, we got some fantastic images. Fanny, I think this is one of my favorite photo shoots I've done in a long time. It's just really ethereal, soft, beautiful images. You can follow Fanny on Instagram right here. Here is her Instagram profile, Fanny Beladona. Make sure you check that out. Also, follow me on Instagram, JMarkWallace. Here's my Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe to Adorama TV. It's absolutely free. And click the bell so you get notifications. Thanks for joining us, and I will see you again next time.